Ladies, do we have any more slips of paper? Okay. We have one item remaining on our agenda, ladies and gentlemen. Folks, we appreciate you sticking through this and briefing us on what's going on. We appreciate that. Members, if you would turn back to file item number 13. Excuse me. File item number 13. Ms. Messer, Mr. Ryan, I think this is your project. A little banged up there in your case. You're throwing your phone around. Yes. Ms. Messer.
Okay. Good to be back. Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce, there may be one of you who may not have had a chance to meet John Ryan yet, who's up here with me. John is one of our program managers in the agency, and he's in charge of our performance management group within the organization. And so you can imagine John has been very focused on all things Delta Plan performance measures and performance tracking. He recently moved into this position. I think it's been a few months now. He used to head up our IT group. So John and I were asked to pull together this report to highlight one of the efforts that staff is undertaking right now related to Delta Plan performance measures. So what I wanted to do, just caveat a little bit that, again, this is one effort. John and his staff are focusing on this. It's part of a multifaceted approach that staff is taking to performance measures and performance tracking and reporting in terms of Delta Plan performance measures. This particular project, and I'll run through it pretty quickly. I realize the staff report's pretty heavy on process and detail, so I'll run us through. We'll do a highlights kind of approach. But this project, the reason why we wanted to bring it to the council is that it's a very critical element in terms of performance management, both in the near term and as we move forward. What it's going to do in the end, the outcome of this project is to build a solid foundation for performance management and tracking and reporting. And what we're looking at now is not only at the Delta Plan performance measures, but eventually linking this with the Delta Science Plan and its performance measures and down the road as we move forward. Staff are conducting other efforts related to performance measures and performance tracking, and I know Dan mentioned that in his presentation, the joint presentation on the 2014 priorities. So other staff in my division have been taking a good look at, what are the status of some of the Delta Plan recommendations and the policies and the reports that are going to be generated out of those, and those are obviously all linked to performance measures. Ultimately, this effort, kind of this bigger effort, the project John's working on, the tracking in general, will roll over, I imagine quite likely, into the implementation committee onto their agenda at a point in time, probably in the not too near future. So staff will be providing some reporting on performance measures as part of a 2013 annual report that we've been working on. So you'll see a different presentation in that sort of a venue that we've kind of been focused on, as well as, what can we be looking at, what can we report on in the near term that complements the work that John is doing. So with that, I think I'd like to kind of just quickly jump into a summary of the project and what are the outcomes we expect from this particular effort. So essentially, this project, we're calling it the Delta Plan Performance Management Tracking Project, entails updating and enhancing an existing technological tool, which is our CIPIS database. And CIPIS, for those of you who may not know, is the Council Project Performance Information System database. And the C, did I get that right, John? Okay. And the C used to stand for CalFed. So this was a tool that was developed during the CalFed era with performance management in mind, in addition to expenditures and inventory on spending in the Delta. So we took a good look at this existing tool and we said, hey, you know what, we can move this forward into the Delta Plan era. We can do some enhancements, some updating, and leverage this existing tool, which in the long run is going to save us time and money. And when we're done with this effort, what the tool is going to do is it's going to allow the council to meet its accountability, its transparency objectives as required by the Delta Reform Act and in the Delta Plan. And for example, the SIPIS is and will continue to be publicly available through our website, and to the implementing agencies who will be able to put data in, update the projects, add new projects in, so it'll be this very flexible and adaptable tool. Specifically, once the project is done, the outcomes are going to do a few things, or will be a few things. They're going to allow us to organize and categorize the 160 Delta Plan performance measures, plus add any new measures that we may develop over time. The project will develop a standard methodology for data collection to address Delta Plan performance measures. It will effectively link the Delta Plan policies, recommendations, performance measures to the agency plans, programs, and projects that will help us measure progress on those recommendations and policies. It will adequately track Delta investments and link those investments to outcomes. It will provide a single source of information that supports the Council's performance tracking objectives. And lastly, it will provide a fact-based information system to support the Council's role of telling the story through annual performance reports, budget reports, public dashboards, report cards, scorecards. So part of what we're looking at a little down the road is these different reporting tools that will allow us to get the information out quickly and in a simple, direct format. So that, in a nutshell, is what this project is taking this database and moving it forward. I had planned to talk about the Delta Plan performance measures a little bit. Would you like me to run through that? Do I need to?
Sure.
Okay.
Don't do all 160 of them.
Come on. Okay, so very quickly, as you know, there are three types of performance measures in the Delta Plan: administrative, output, and outcome. And we've given you the numbers in the staff report, how they break up. So the vast majority of the performance measures in the Delta Plan fall under the administrative category. And these are focused on implementation of near-term actions generally contained in the policies and the recommendations of the Delta Plan. So a couple of examples of these. And the first one is not contained in a policy or recommendation, but I thought it was appropriate for this presentation. So in Chapter 2, we have an administrative performance measure that calls for us to complete a report on revisions to the Delta Plan performance measures by December 31st of 2014. So many of these administrative performance measures have to do with complete a report or some sort of action or form a group. Another example is from Chapter 3, recommendation WRR5, develop water supply reliability element guidelines. The administrative performance measure is to have that DWR has developed and published guidelines for the preparation of an expanded water supply reliability element by December 31st of 2014. So you can begin to see the pattern of what the administrative performance measures are like. So output measures, these evaluate the factors that may be influencing outcomes and include actual implementation actions. For example, number of acres restored, acre feet of water released. They also include unforeseen factors such as floods, ocean conditions. And one example I pulled out of the Delta Plan is in Chapter 4, and it's linked to policy ERP2, restore habitats at appropriate elevations. And the output measure is measured as progress measured in acres of restored or enhanced habitat is being made toward the biological opinion's targets of restoring 8,000 acres of tidal marsh and 17 to 20,000 acres of floodplain rearing habitat. So that's an example of one of our output measures. And then lastly, we have outcome measures, which evaluate responses in the system to management actions or to these natural inputs. And examples of these include Chapter 4, recommendation ERR2, prioritize and implement projects that restore delta habitat. So the outcome measure for that is to measure progress toward achieving the state and federal doubling goal for wild Central Valley salmonids relative to 1995 levels. And another example of this that I thought was appropriate to our earlier discussion about levy and prioritization is from Chapter 7, related to RRP1, prioritization of state investments and levies, Water deliveries to East Bay Mud, Contra Costa Water District, the Central Valley Project, and the State Water Project are not interrupted by floods or earthquakes. So I pulled kind of a smattering of them to just remind folks, what we had in the plan. And unless there are questions,
Yes.
Absolutely.
You knew there was going to be a question.
Of course. I thought maybe you guys were worn out by now, but
No, you didn't slip it by me. These are fairly opaque to me, but I think it's probably coming from a different world. But I think the one way these would make more sense to me is put them on a temporal basis. In other words, in the plan, some of these say to be completed by a certain date.
Right.
So that's your budget, right?
Right.
I mean, if it's still realistic.
Yes. And in some cases, the dates have passed, but
But I think there probably should be some way to schedule these over a period of time. Because it's one thing, it's one aspect to complete an activity or a metric. It's another thing to do it in a timely fashion. And a lot of these are going to be sequential. You're going to have to do one thing, and then others will follow.
Right.
So it might be interesting to prioritize
Map them
these.
out.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them, but to try to do a critical path of those that are very, very important, and the achievement of which will cause other good things to happen. Does that make any sense?
it does. And I will follow up with that. I was going to wrap this up with next steps. And one of the things that we had committed to in the Delta Plan and described in there was, as we move forward, taking a look, especially at the output and outcome performance measures, and further refining those that we decide need it. So we will be engaging in this effort. This is something we will be doing starting in 2014. And these are the kind of questions we will be asking ourselves. So timescales, metrics.
What's he doing here?
How are we going to measure this? What is the available information? Who has it? And really kind of flesh all of these out.
Right. And what things have to occur before you're in a position to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would suggest, there are how many of these things? 120, 40, almost 150. Pick the ones that you think are most important. And there may be, 10, 15 seminal events. And go for them. Because in order to achieve some of those, the other stuff has to be done too.
Right.
And it would be a route on the way to a destination.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's definitely the full spectrum when you look through all 100. Some are very straightforward. For example, the Central Valley drinking water policy. I think Dan Ray mentioned that earlier. That was a performance measure we had in there. It's done. So, that was a very straightforward. Check that one off. There are definitely others we need to kind of look to maybe together as a package and say, how do these sort of
and that'll be a lot
stagger
of
with each other?
And part of that linking that we're doing from the performance measures to the programs and projects themselves is prioritizing those performance measures. So I think that's going to help us. It's going to give us that picture to
everything
exactly
all
what
has
you're
to
saying.
fit in together.
Predecessors, successors, all of that we've had those discussions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll fit in very nicely
Yep.
with what we're trying to do.
I like it.
Other questions? Thank you.
Well,
Thanks.
That was easy.
Let's
Just
see.
seeing if there was anybody left back there. Got very quiet in here. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience
Thank you.
who would like to speak to the council?
I think you get a Purple Heart for this,
Seeing
and
no
from
person
taking all the-
indicating that. Members, our next meeting will be after the holidays, so I'd just like to wish all of you happy holidays, and we will see you at the start of next year, the 23rd of January. I think it's the 23rd of January. And so we'll see you
in
next year.
Japan.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry,
No, I was just going to say Delta Protection is going to start at like 4:30,
that same day?
but it's in West Sac.
Okay, would you check our agenda for January, because
I just-
Supervisor Roostaller noted there's a meeting of the Delta Protection Commission in West Sacramento at 4
It's going
o'clock?
to start at 4:30.
4:30.
So I would just have to scoot out of here.
Yeah,
maybe
but
10 minutes
let's make sure our
early.
business is scheduled in a way to accommodate that.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right, stand adjourned. Thank you very much.